Welcome back to Empowerment Radio. Uh, Life lessons learned this year. And one of that happened for me actually in a cave during a caving tour. First time Danielle and I did that. And yeah, it was a very interesting experience. We didn't think much of it. We just thought, hey, it's the day after my birthday. Let's just go into a cave and explore. And so we went with a guide and a small group. And just at the start of it, felt very relaxed. But when he said, so now we're going to go into the cave, I was looking around, where's the entrance? And then I saw it. It was like a tiny little hole in that wall, that mountain wall. And I thought, there is no way that anyone can go into that little hole, literally on the ground. You had to be a little worm to make the way in there. But he just kneeled down, poop, gone. He was gone. He just wheedled himself through it and expected us to follow. Well, I was next, and so I did follow, and I squeezed myself. I'm 6 foot, so I'm 6'4", so he was a little smaller. So I thought, okay, probably these are built for even bigger people, so I may be able to make it. So I squeezed myself through it, and finally I was in, thinking that once you're in, there will be this cathedral-like cave opening, and you're just gonna see all the beauty. Well, no, I wasn't really. It wasn't really like that. What it was, that it basically, the opening continued to be very small in a tunnel that was about 30 feet long. And you had to really crawl through the tunnel and hope that you will not get stuck in it. Now, I'm not really claustrophobic, but that was definitely something where I felt, I wonder when this will end, because I didn't see the guide anymore. It's getting darker and darker because the light from the entrance, of course, got weaker and weaker. I had a lamp, but that didn't really help either. So at some point I was in the middle of it. I felt there was a little voice inside of me that says, no, don't do this. You may get stuck, and then you have tons of rock above you and below you, and you will never get out of it. Of course, one of those little catastrophizing thoughts that just, want you to bail. And another part of me said, no, you have to move forward. They are waiting for you, or the guide is waiting for you. Others are behind you. They want to get through it. So I was literally between a rock and a hard place. And that avoider side of me wanted to go backwards. It really gave me strong arguments of why it would be better just to back out and make an end to it. Well, when I was in that moment, I thankfully had also my inner coach come up, and that part of me said, well, what does it feel like? Yes, once you're out, you're going to have a few moments of instant gratification. But afterwards, you're going to feel really bad because you're the only one, and the other's going to have a great time. Plus, you're letting them down because the guide probably feels also a little split about, having to leave you behind. So there was this other voice that really calmly said, no, you will regret it. Keep on going. And then I remembered another coach who was more a physical fitness coach who said, you can do it, nothing to it. I loved that mantra. It was always when, you're running up the hill and it was a little bit harder. She always said that. And so I pushed myself further, and finally I made it. And what happened afterwards, being through, and I actually got really stuck right before the end of that tunnel, and I had to absolutely push myself and scrape my skin, but then I made it. I felt so good, so proud that all the rest of it was easy. We went down like a 100-foot wall. We had to rope ourselves down. We had to swim through an underground lake, which was freezing cold. It was an adventure, which I didn't really know it was until we were in it. But it didn't really matter. There was no avoidance anymore because I was able to break through that initial avoidance tendency. So the lesson that I really feel for this year is so important to share is that avoidance becoming a silent killer, like a client of mine called it. A client who was not able to go to work, who was not able to drive her car, who was not able to, go to a grocery store or to a farmer's market, a client whose life became smaller and smaller because of that strong inner avoidance that just made her life more and more, well, you could say uncomfortably small. It's certainly not a comfort zone. And her anxiety more and more something that was running every moment of the waking and also sleeping time. So avoidance, even though the idea of the intention of the avoidance is to somehow get us out of something that could be dangerous or uncomfortable, in the end, it is something that does create more a sense of powerlessness. And basically, four things happen if you continue to avoid. Now, let me just say, I'm not talking about avoidance of bungee jumping or swimming with sharks or telling your boss what you really think about him. No, those things may be really, good things to not necessarily follow through with, unless there is really something that you feel strongly about. It needs to be done, like with your boss. But I'm talking about the avoidance of small discomfort. For example, the avoidance of spending time with yourself. How many of us are avoiding being alone? Avoiding just sitting there with your thoughts, with your feelings, with your body. How often do we just, as soon as we come home, either take the TV on or look at our phone or, go on the internet and just to not have to feel yourself? That's an example. Or we are avoiding, for example, our finances. We somehow know, well, maybe we're running low on funds, or maybe I'm not really sure when I can retire, but we're avoiding the clarity around it. We don't go to the financial advisor and try to figure out what's really going on. Avoiding going to the doctor, same story. Oh, I don't want to know. So things we avoid that are really important to us and that make our life smaller and us feeling less and less confident in ourselves, four things happen. The first thing is that whatever we avoid becomes a bigger and bigger issue. It just, becomes that big boulder that blocks you to move forward, and you feel more and more stuck. Now, a part of you, that's the second thing that happens, that inner avoider, which I see more like a part of your subconscious mind, a part of your protective team, really sees that, well, I was right. See, I said we should avoid it, and we did avoid it. So I am feeling reinforced in my beliefs that avoidance is the way to go. So that part of you doesn't really have a lot of confidence in your conscious mind, who usually should take the direction or, be the guide overall where to go. It says, no, I think your conscious mind is basically giving in to me, the avoider, so I'll take over. And then avoidance becomes a habit. And you also notice that you are canceling out more and more aspects of your life. And your life does become smaller and smaller. And at some point, you identify yourself with simply being an avoider. And that is the toxic effect of avoidance. Like I experienced this feeling of, oh, there is an instant gratification when you avoid. It's like almost this huge relief that just goes through you, and you feel like, oh, I just escaped. And that is such a strong feeling that it becomes almost like an addiction that your mind is automatically going through. I want to have more of that feeling of relief, that feeling of, being allowed to get away with it, play hooky. And unfortunately, what happens is it makes you weaker and weaker. So what do you do with the avoidance pattern? I mean, how do you get out of it? Well, I think we have to really, when we are going into the avoidance, we have to ask ourselves, why don't we want to avoid this situation? What is really important about that, whether it is about, the finances or your health, or maybe really getting closer to yourself. Why is it important for me to follow through? And what are the consequences if I do avoid? How will I feel afterwards? How will my life then turn out to be once I avoid? I know I feel like in the moment better, but long term, the avoider is a short term thinker. What's happening long term? And then you are basically starting with small positive steps that gets you out of this avoidance mode, with also, really having a good positive self-talk. For me, it was this little mantra: you can do it, nothing to it. But it may be also just a little saying of, it's okay, we can do this, as if you're talking to an inner part of you that wants just to be reassured that this is really a safe thing to do, and the sky won't fall. And that's really important. And I think that's something that I have seen, especially this year, surprisingly, with quite a few clients who were just through this avoidance pattern, not breaking through as fast as they could have. And these steps certainly help to really be aware of how avoidance is something that, even though it has a good intention, it also is something that in the end really just increases the anxiety and decreases your sense of self, and especially that sense of being able to handle life. Now, another thing that I, in the same context, really have emphasized before, but I felt it several times this year very strongly, which is how important it is to be able to rely on each other and on yourself. Just the other day, we have horses, and they eat. They eat a lot, and they eat, hay, and we were at the end of our hay supply. So, I saw this coming, so I called the hay delivery person, and I told him, sorry, we are pretty much out. Please come and bring us some bales. And he said, yeah, of course, absolutely. So I called him even on that same day. Hey, can you come before 4 o'clock? We're gonna have some friends over at night, so it would be good if you can come. Yeah, no problem. Well, of course, he didn't show up, and there was no hay, and the horses didn't have anything to eat. So I had to scrape the last little rest together and had to give him that. And the next day I had to ask a friend to borrow me some hay. And, I was disappointed. And I think what happens when you are let down, and this was unfortunately the third time that happened, is that you really lose trust. And you really feel like, yeah, this is a nice person, and I'm sure there were some reasons. In this case, it was he forgot. But in the end, you just feel, yeah, you cannot trust the person. And it's not about only the relationship to others, where we have to really learn to trust our word or the word that is said. It's really about the relationship with yourself as well. I mean, that is where we are silently undermining our confidence by not following through, by talking a big game. Yeah, of course I'm gonna do this, and tomorrow I'm gonna follow through and go to the gym, and tomorrow I'm gonna clean up my desk, and I'm gonna make this phone call, and I'm definitely gonna visit my parents this year, and nothing happens. And that is again where that inner observer of us, who just basically just keeps track on anything we're doing and thinking and feeling, feels we're letting ourselves down. We are not trustworthy. Our word doesn't matter. And that gives us a greater sense of insecurity. I think it's a major reason for anxiety. And it also makes you feel that somehow changes are harder for you, because you have subconsciously that sense that since no one is following through, what should be any different this time? So just really think about that avoidance, and also being true to your word for this year, or the rest of this year and the year coming, to really be more mindful about, to not fall in these two major traps that both are only creating more stress and anxiety. When we come back, we're going to talk about other life lessons I've learned and maybe life lessons you can share with us.